We must recognize that it is providential that the West has come to India, and yet someone must show the East to the West and convince the West that the East has a contribution to make to the history of civilization. India is no beggar of the West, and yet, even though the West may think she is, I'm not for thrusting off Western civilization and becoming segregated in our independence. Let us have a deep association. If Providence wants England to be that channel of communication, of that deeper association, I'm willing to accept it with all humility. I have great faith in human nature, and I think the West will find its true mission. I speak bitterly of Western civilization when I'm conscious that it is betraying its trust and thwarting its own purpose. The West must not make herself a curse to the world by using her power for her own selfish needs, but by teaching the ignorant and helping the weak, she should save herself from the worst danger that the strong is liable to incur by making the feeble acquire power enough to resist her intrusion. And also, she must not make her materialism to be the final thing, but must realize that she is doing a service in freeing the spiritual being from the tyranny of matter. I'm not against one nation in particular, but against the general idea of all nations. What is nation? It is the aspect of a whole people as an organized power. This organization incessantly keeps up the insistence of the population on becoming strong and efficient, but this strenuous effort after strength and efficiency drains man's energy from his higher nature, where he is self-sacrificing and creative. For thereby man's power of sacrifice is diverted from his ultimate object, which is moral, to the maintenance of this organization, which is mechanical. And yet, in this, he feels all the satisfaction of moral exaltation and therefore becomes supremely dangerous to humanity. He feels relieved of the urging of his conscience when he can transfer his responsibility to this machine, which is the creation of his intellect and not his complete moral personality. By this device, the people which loves freedom perpetuate slavery in large proportion of the world with the comfortable feeling of pride of having done its duty. Men who are naturally just can be cruelly unjust both in their act and their thought, accompanied by a feeling that they are helping the world to receive its deserts. Men who are honest can blindly go on robbing others of their human rights for self-aggrandizement, all the while abusing the deprived for not deserving better treatment. We have seen in our everyday life, even small organizations of business and profession produce callousness of feeling in men who are not naturally bad, and we can well imagine what a moral havoc it is causing in a world where whole peoples are furiously organizing themselves for gaining wealth and power. Nationalism is a great menace. It is the particular thing which for years has been at the bottom of India's troubles. And inasmuch as we have been ruled and dominated by a nation that is strictly political in its attitude, we have tried to develop within ourselves, despite our inheritance from the past, a belief in our eventual political destiny. There are different parties in India with different ideals. Some are struggling for political independence. Others think that the time has not arrived yet for that, and yet believe that India should have the rights that the English colonies have. They wish to gain autonomy as far as possible. In the beginning of the history of political agitation in India, there was not the conflict between parties which there is today. At that time, there was a party known as the Indian Congress. It had no real program. They had a few grievances for redress by the authorities. They wanted larger representation in the council house and more freedom in municipal government. They wanted scraps of things, but they had no constructive ideal. Therefore, I was lacking in enthusiasm for their methods. The was my conviction that what India most needed was constructive work coming from within herself. In this work, we must take all risks and go on doing the duties which by right are ours, though in the teeth of persecution, winning moral victory at every step by our failure and suffering. We must show those who are over us that we have in ourselves the strength of moral power, the power to suffer for truth. Where we have nothing to show, we have only to beg. It would be mischievous if the gifts we wish for were granted to us at once, and I have told my countrymen time and again to combine for the work of creating opportunities to give vent to our spirit of self-sacrifice and not for the purpose of begging. The party, however, lost power because the people soon came to realize how futile was the half policy adopted by them. The party split, and there arrived the extremists who advocated independence of action and discarded the begging method, the easiest method of relieving one's mind from his responsibility towards his country. Their ideals were based on Western history. They had no sympathy with the special problems of India. They did not recognize the patent fact that there were causes in our social organization which made the Indian incapable of coping with the alien. What should we do if, for any reason, England was driven away? We should simply be victims for other nations. The same social weaknesses would prevail. The thing we in India have to think of is this: to remove those social customs and ideals which have generated a want of self-respect and a complete dependence on those above us, a state of affairs which has been brought about entirely by the domination in India of the caste system and the blind and lazy habit of relying upon the authority of traditions that are incongruous anachronisms in the present age. Once again, I draw your attention to the difficulties India has had to encounter and her struggle to overcome them. Her problem was the problem of the world in miniature. India is too vast in its area and too diverse in its races. It is many countries packaged in one geographical receptacle. It is just the opposite of what Europe truly is, namely one country made into many. Thus, Europe in its culture and growth has had the advantage of the strength of the many as well as the strength of the one. India, on the contrary, being naturally many, yet advantageously one, has all along suffered from the looseness of its diversity and the feebleness of its unity. A true unity is like a round globe. It rolls on, carrying its burden easily. But diversity is a many-cornered thing, which has to be dragged and pushed with all force. Be it said to the credit of India that this diversity was not her own creation. She has had to accept it as a fact from the beginning of her history. In America and Australia, Europe has simplified her problem by almost exterminating the original population. Even in the present age, this spirit of extermination is making itself manifest in the inhospitable shutting out of aliens by those who themselves were aliens in the lands they now occupy. But India tolerated difference of races from the first, and that spirit of toleration has acted all through her history. Her caste system is the outcome of this spirit of toleration, for India has all along been trying experiments in evolving a social unity within which all the different peoples could be held together while fully enjoying the freedom of maintaining their own differences. The tie has been as loose as possible, yet as close as the circumstances permitted. This has produced something like a United States of a social federation whose common name is Hinduism.